Greetings and welcome back to CS275 Database Development. In this lesson, we're going to go over grouping table data. So for our topics for the day, we are going to talk about how to group data within a database, and then we'll do some demonstration of various grouping methods and then different functions you can use to accomplish this. Course objectives, you will be able to do your own grouping on a table given a database that is pre-constructed for you. So with that, let's go with working with values. As we look through some of these, they do need to be numbers, right? You can't get the average of a string. If you don't remember what string was, we talked about that last lesson, but it's basically text. The count is just counting, so therefore that will work. And then a lot of this is pretty straightforward, right? The average gives you the average, the max gives you the max. If you don't put the as in there, the column header will be whatever thing you're running, and we'll show some examples at the demo time. But again, this is summarizing the values. You can get the count, average, max, min. There's a whole bunch of these. I'm not going to show you every single one that you can do, but I'll kind of show you how it works when we get to the demo time. The next piece is distinct values. So this first one is actually just the generic select the country from the customer, so what country the customer comes from. And then the next one, though, is the distinct countries. So if you just want to know what your users or whatever your customers are, what countries they come from, without having to look through 500 people from the US and 200 from the UK, whatever it works out to be. This is, you have people from the US, from the UK, and then, list of the countries, just the countries. And then you can even go further and, actually count and have it do it for you. One thing I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of this, this lesson is becoming a lot more advanced. And really the last lesson started it, but as we're going through the next few lessons, if you are going to go into database development, right, that is your job. These are the types of things you're going to need to be able to do, because people are going to pay you to be able to get the data out of the database, right? That is the piece. Now, the first 5 or so lessons that we went over, those are all skills that as a programmer, you'll need to be able to get the database, and then you're going to use your programming to do what you need to do with the database. At least that's been my experience with a lot of this. Like, if you are going to work on a database and that is your job, the skills you're going forward are going to be a little bit more specific to you. Now, again, as a programmer, you can still use these so it gets the data using the SQL for you, but a lot of the times you'll get the data and then you're just trying to get the data and use it in whatever program or web page you're using. But going forward, this stuff and the examples that I'm going to show you are what your employers are going to be looking for in database development. So with that, we're going to talk about grouping last. And as you might imagine, it just allows you to group. So in this case, we're going to count all the IDs, which is unique. This is just the ID column. We're going to get all the countries, and then it's from the customers. We're going to group by those countries. And you'll see kind of the differences as we go through the demos with this. So let me go and pull up our database, and we'll talk about each of these different pieces, right? So our first one, we are going to use the count. And in this case, we're going to count first names and then as the number of users. Now, we could count IDs. I mean, in this case, it's just specifically how many are in the database. That's all this is really getting, right? 8 in there. Now, however, what if we want to get the number of Johns, right? So in this case, I did as number of users. In this case, we're going to do as John, so the column has to be John's, because we want to see where first name equals John, which, if you remember, there's 1 Jane, the rest of them are Johns, so therefore there's 7 Johns. Now, let me show you an example real quick. If you don't do the as, right, it's still going to work. It's just literally going to put your function in there as the column header. All right, now to show you that, that there's all the different min, max, average, I'm going to use an average function next. So again, select average. Now age is the only number that I have. So average age from users, and then bam. And I could get the average age of the Johns if I added the where clause in here. This is an example of using this. So I'm not going to go over every min-max. You plug it in. The key is, and that is the column header right there. And then you're getting the average of it. We use the as, which shows up here, and then from the correct table. And that gives us the data, right? The next thing I'm going to show you is what happens when you get everything, right? So this is our standard select first name from user. So that's going to get all of the first names, John, Jane, John, 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 right? Now, we're moving on to that second piece where we're using the group concept. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and use this distinct, right? We want to be able to group, but we need to get the distinct. So John and Jane. And if we remember, we talked about the countries. You know, if this was would be a list of all the countries, but just the countries. It wouldn't have like you see here, John, Jane, Jane, John, John, John. I just want to know what are my names. What first names do I have? I have John and Jane. I don't need to see John 7 times. So that's what distinct does. And again, this is more advanced as you go into database development, and your employer wants you to pull very specific. They just want to know the unique first names. That's another term that you might hear from, and sometimes even some languages use that as the command to select unique. But let's go ahead. There's two more commands I want to run and show you through. So in this case, we are going to count the distincts. So now we can literally look at this and see that there's two, but this allows you to do that. And again, I didn't use the as, so therefore it used the function. So again, remember what everything does. That is a key to some of these lessons. Not super hard to just type this command, but you really need to understand how the command is working. All right, the last one is we're actually going to add now the group by. All right, so this is going to kind of combine what we're looking at, and in this case, we have 7 Johns and 1 Jane. So if we were going to use the country one I was talking about, there may be 500 from the US, 200 from the UK, blah, blah, blah. So again, but look at all of these different pieces. This is going to be more advanced stuff that your employer might be like, I want to know this information. And then you're going to have to figure out what you're going to put here in order to get the information that they want. And this, so as we move forward, that's kind of what we're looking at, right? You are a database developer, and you need to be able to get the information that you or your employer or someone is asking you to get. With that, that's all I have for this lesson. We will see you next lesson.